today I feel honored to be able to talk to you. And leading up to this day, I was fretting about the speech. But you know what? I'm just gonna reflect on my career with you and share some keynotes from the field with you. Plus, I also think that it would be a wonderful tradition if we highlighted the individual stories of people doing the work in the field and how we are impacted by the work at future conferences. And I can already think of some of you in the room that I could just pass the baton on to for the next conference. And during this talk, I want to touch on a bit on my journey to understanding trauma, on the restorative power of relationships, and the importance of belonging to a community that sustains us. And I'm present to that right now with who you are. I think of some of you in the room already and how many kids you've helped, and it moves me to be talking to you. As context for my talk, I want to share a bit about my own background, a little bit more. As Maria mentioned, I was born in El Salvador, and when I was born there in 1980, the country civil war was really picking up steam. In 1981, in December, there was a horrific massacre in a village called El Mozote, and that village was just a few hills over from where I was living in Corinto, Roxanne. And by the time I was 2 years old, my dad had already fled El Salvador because he didn't want to be part of either side of the conflict, so he fled. Somehow, he made it through McAllen to Houston, made it to a soccer field, and some countrymen helped him get to Virginia until he came back a second time and then went out to California. But the conflict was bloody, and I still remember going to sleep to the sound of firing bullets and waking up to find dead bodies on the banks of the river, and having soldiers come down on my mom and my grandmother's front porch. By 1985, my mom had left El Salvador to join my dad in Long Beach, and I was left behind with my mom's family, a story that probably sounds familiar to many of you, right? Parents leave, the grandparents raise the kids. And then in 1990, my dad went back to Corinto to get my brothers and I. And so I left San Salvador on a flight headed for Los Angeles. And I wasn't Gladys, I was Sandra. The Salvadoran passport that I carried had a US visa stamped on it, and I was traveling with my godfather. And I arrived in LA on the night of my 10th birthday, on June 6th of 1990. And for the next decade, I lived in Long Beach, by Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue, in a neighborhood predominantly of Cambodian and Mexican immigrants. And I attended school as an undocumented immigrant until I adjusted my status as a junior in college. And during my childhood in El Salvador and leading up to my coming of age years in Long Beach, I experienced all forms of child abuse that you can imagine. And as a result, trauma, right? That trauma that gets embedded in your body and in your brain. And besides that, growing up undocumented, I also came to know in my own skin and bones the crushing impact of poverty on one's ability to meet our basic needs. I still remember in college there were times when I didn't even have $1 to buy a bagel. So usually I would pack lunch from the pizza place where I worked until 3 o'clock in the morning. And I also came to know the kinds of judgments that people can pass on you because of your socioeconomic status and the worth they decide to assign to you based on poverty. In my life as an undocumented immigrant, abused, traumatized, and poor child, there were moments when I wished I hadn't been born at all. And through all this, I just kept surviving my circumstances, piece by piece. But I anchored myself in school, and schools and library till this day for me are a safe haven. and places where I tend to thrive. And I became an immigration attorney really out of my own necessity to understand the laws and processes that impact undocumented immigrants, as well as to fulfill on a commitment that I made to myself that I would share that knowledge with kids, young people, and adults who are still undocumented. And I also committed myself to treating people with dignity and respect, no matter their socioeconomic status. And even now that I'm a lawyer and part of middle-class America, I try to keep it real and not forget where I come from. I try to stay humble. And I really don't take for granted the security and the stability that I now enjoy in my life. During law school, I kept true to my intention of becoming an immigration attorney and working at a nonprofit. I wanted to give this information to people for free because we couldn't afford it and people I wanted to help were not going to be able to afford it either. And I had heard about Catholic Charities through my father's friend in high school who had volunteered with them to help people like my dad apply for amnesty in the 1980s. So I thought, one day I'm going to work at Catholic Charities. But no. While I was studying for the bar exam in the summer of 2006, I applied for a job at ProBar. And I remember applying for both a children's position and an adult program position, but Meredith offered me the children's position because of my story. And at that time, the children's program at ProBar was just 3 people. It was a pro bono coordinator, Diane, Lauren Fisher, who was a paralegal at that time, and then the direct representation attorney, because at that time there wasn't money for direct representation yet. And I didn't quite set out to focus on children, but Meredith hired me because of my background. And her doing that, hiring me for the children's position, would really go on to have a profound impact on my professional and personal life. And as I began to meet with the clients in the chattel trailer, the KYR trailer at IES Los Fresnos, and I began to hear their stories of abuse, of rape, of abandonment, of all this trauma that they had been through, something in me also began to awaken. And I didn't know it then, but hearing their stories, and then hearing myself tell them what happened to you wasn't your fault, and you're loved no matter what, at some point, the trauma in me began to surface as well. And I remember it being a hard time for me emotionally. I didn't know quite what to do with the triggering thoughts and feelings that were coming up within me. And I remember it began to affect me at work. And I even tried to quit on Meredith a few times. I can't handle this. I signed up to be a lawyer. What's happening to me? And we didn't have social workers back then, so social workers in the room, we love you. I'm so glad that you're part of our teams because it gets funny without you guys. But the grace of Meredith, Diane, of Lauren, and the patience that they had with me as I was going through that process myself is one of the reasons that I look upon my first job at ProBar with profound love and gratefulness. In fact, in my office, I still have the little picture of Meredith and Lauren, and even Carrie was there. I treasure that photo. Because you see, up until that time in my life, I wasn't worried about what happened to me. I need to process some trauma, right? No, I was just worried about making it through school and finding a way out of poverty. That was my main goal, and staying out of trouble so that I wouldn't be arrested or anything, because as an undocumented person, you just want to walk a fine line. So I didn't have the space as a child to process childhood events or trauma. The first time I tried to get counseling was when I was struggling in law school because I wasn't concentrating. I didn't, trauma has an impact, it affects the way you concentrate. I didn't know it then. And I was like, okay, I guess I should go talk to a counselor. But the moment the counselor said something about mandated reporting child abuse stuff, I was like, I'm out of here. I didn't mention anything. I wasn't going to talk about my past because I didn't want anybody in my family to go to jail. So that was the end of that. And the more I worked with kids as an attorney, the more my awareness grew around how abuse and trauma impacts children. I was hearing and seeing the impact with my own eyes, and I was also uncovering the impact within me. In a quote by Gandhi, "You find yourself when you lose yourself in the service of others," really rings true for me because it was like happening to me. And when the kids opened up to me about their stories, it allowed me to name and recognize my own trauma. And I will forever be grateful for their courage and for letting me in. They've done a whole lot more for me than I've ever done for them. As I prepare to share my story with you, I wonder if it would be a little TMI, right? A little too much information to open up this much with you guys. But then I thought of our kids and other people in similar circumstances and how their situation sometimes compels them to reveal such personal events to us. And the least I can do to honor them is to share my own story and how their courage has been a huge contribution to my life and my understanding of trauma. Like them, I now know that there is nothing for me to be ashamed of. And this I know for sure. And since my first job at Crowbar, I've learned a lot more about trauma and how trauma affects our thoughts and behavior patterns. Now I can recognize trauma that I have been through. And this recognition allows me to notice certain triggers, engage in reflection, and address my needs. For example, like I can tell you, I'm nervous, right? And just be with that. And that I'm just trying to survive this speech. And that's okay, that's human. And there's space for my humanity. But when we provide a safe space for children, we're really allowing them to process trauma. And when we help them recognize that experience and process that trauma, we empower them to name and prioritize their needs. And at that point, they can open up to us about their true wishes. In this talk, I won't pretend to cover the ins and outs of trauma or all the ways that we can overcome trauma. For that, I invite you to look at your program and attend the sessions presented by social workers, by our colleagues in the room. It is from them that I have learned a great deal about trauma. But I do, however, want to touch on the power of relationships, restorative relationships, because they are the key element for building inner resources for ourselves and for our clients. Most often, ironically, trauma is caused by certain events in our lives and certain relationships. And it takes restorative relationships to heal us from that trauma. For me, there are 3 memorable restorative relationships from my life. 1, Mr. Pickett. He was my 12th grade English teacher and my soccer coach at Long Beach Poly High School. When I told Mr. Pickett, because that senior year, leading up to that senior year is when you're like submitting all your essays and whatnot, and I told Mr. Pickett, like, I can't apply to the UC system, like I can't afford to go there, I don't have a social security number. And he grabs me by the hand, takes me down to the counselor's office, and he's like, Gladys, we just need to call the Social Security Administration and we're gonna get you a social security number. Yeah, not Mr. Pickett. He's this tall English guy. I'm like, Mr. Pickett, I don't think it works that way. You just get to call the Social Security Administration and ask for a social security number. But with his actions, his attempt to intervene on my behalf was letting me know that I was worth fighting for and that he was willing to go to bat for me. That restores a sense of self-worth in me as a kid. And then there was Dr. Schmidt. He was my college professor. And I was having a hard time that year because my mom had been hospitalized at the UCLA Harbor Medical Center due to her mental health needs. And I was struggling with the aftermath of it all, dealing with it, having to call the police on my mom, watching her taken in a white linen and thrown in the back of a police car. And he noticed that something was happening. And so he invited me to lunch at the faculty club. And he just sat across the table and created space for me to say whatever there was for me to say. And in his active listening, I knew that he was someone who cared for me about my well-being. And this just helped me make it through that year. And again, in that relationship, he restored my faith and hope in humanity. And then there's Professor Bloomberg. She was my community property professor in law school. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I was struggling in law school, and she invited me to participate in an academic support class. And through that support group, she guided me, she saw potential in me, she invested in me, and she restored for me a sense of inner confidence that if I could take what she was teaching me and guiding me through in my hard work, that I would be okay through law school. And I did. I graduated and I got an A in her class. Something that I was like, I'll never be able to get an A in a class, like community property in law school. But I did. And for many children whom you serve in your role as the attorney or advocate, you're building restorative relationships with them. And the foundation for building any relationship is trust. And as advocates and attorneys, when we accompany kids through the crisis, through the process that they're going through, you're building trust for them. It really doesn't take much to communicate to a kid, you matter, you're worth it, we believe in you. And the simple act of showing them that someone cares regardless of the outcome restores people. And as we navigate through the spaces it takes to build those relationships with our clients, we learn from each other as a community about the key ingredients that allows us to work well with the kids. For example, at this conference and from each other, we learn about speaking to kids at their level, that whatever we communicate to them, they must receive that message in a way that lands for them, that speaks to their listening, not to how professional we gotta sound or how we gotta say things, but that speaks to their listening. We learn from each other about being humble and culturally aware. For the many kids we serve, concepts that we take for granted in our society, like the legal system, are new for our kids. And so we have to learn to see the world from their eyes. We also learn to create awareness about how we show up for our clients. Again, the social work colleagues in the room for me have been big teachers on this. Because children who have experienced trauma, they develop a certain gut instinct for assessing people and whether they can trust us. And the power of accompanying is about empowering kids to achieve their goals and based on what they want and not necessarily what we may prescribe for them. And we don't reduce our kids to their circumstances or to their trauma. We make space for them to process their events, and then we work to build them up to their potential. Now, restoring faith and hope for children is a tall order. And in doing so, we depend on a community that sustains us in this work. Each other, our colleagues back at the office. And we don't do it alone. At the Young Center, we often say that no one of us owns the case, right? We own it together as a team. And we don't need to do this work alone. That's why getting together at a conference like this reminds us of the resources around us. Since I began doing this work 13 years ago, for me this work has truly been transformational. I have built wonderful relationships with some of you in the room, and as a community, you truly are a sustaining force for me. I feel a profound sense of gratefulness for all of you, and for your encouragement, for your persistence, your ideals, and your mentorship. And just as you have impacted my life, as a community, you also sustain space for the transformation of the kids that we serve. As you will hear from Javeli later on, a former client of ProBar. the power for change that is generated by this community also goes on to live with our kids. One of the most recurring things I hear from former clients is their gratitude towards the abogadas. And they always say abogadas. Sorry guys, I'm throwing in there too. It's like abogadas that help them with their cases. Some of them contact us years later after we finish their cases. Because sometimes it takes time and perspective to reflect on how someone has impacted our lives. Now that I'm older, I look back and see the restorative relationships in my life that helped me during a certain period of time. And as I stand up here in awe of this community, because we're all zealous advocates with different experiences here. And I know that out there in the world and what is happening right now, we're a force to be reckoned with. Sometimes eyes knows not to mess with us. And when they see us coming, they change their minds sometimes. So we're truly a force to be reckoned with. And the work that we're doing is valuable, and now more than ever. But even when we lose, and I get the feeling we're losing often these days, even when we lose, we win. Because when we walk with kids, when we accompany them, when we bear witness to what is happening, we're providing for them an example of how we can show up for others. And to channel our social workers in the room again, our wins are also about creating those healing spaces for our clients, and not just about the green card. A kid with a green card, without housing, and without healing, and without counseling, can only do so much before they call us again for a different need. So the current obstacles we face right now may not let up, not in the next year, and maybe not in the next 4 years, and the 4 years beyond that. But we do have a choice in how we react and respond to those obstacles. Family separations may very well continue to happen, and we will bear witness to our children are hurt in the process. And I know these cases can impact us as parents, for me, 2018, it really made me work through that incident in 1985 when my mom left, and what that was like as I was working in family separation cases last year. But in the next plenary, right after this, we're going to have a panel on family separations, and we're going to know how to respond. We're going to learn from them about how we're responding as a community. So I hope that this conference uplifts you and fills your cup, that you take in the collective energy, the knowledge, and the experience in this room, and that you know that you're in a safe space, that this community understands the power of connection, because we're a loving, kind, and compassionate community. If there is anything inspiring that you see in me, it's really just a reflection of you. The confidence that flows through me is the result of the space that you provided me, because you believe in me. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. Your listening to my story truly lets my soul feel its worth. So connect. Sit with people you don't know. Hug each other. And let the joy within you shine at this conference. Thank you.